You'll see why in a second, why it fits into having to kind of fight through today a little bit. We're in this series talking about Pass It On, and so we've got a couple different things we wanted to talk about, but before I get into that content, you guys probably, most of you already know this, but just a heads up, at the end of this month, July 29th, we will not be meeting in the school. We want to kind of live up to our name, Go Church, and so we're going to go out and be at the beach at Pine Island on Sunday morning, the 29th. We're going to have some food, some fellowship, and some worship, and just a chance for the church to go be the church at the beach, and so we're very excited for that. The catch with that one is it's going to be early. We're going to get there at 8, and so that's going to be when we start. We're going to have a good time together. Some really cool ways to love the people that are there. We want to pay for some parking and hand out water bottles and just love our neighbors at the beach on the 29th. So that should be a pretty cool opportunity in 2 weeks. The next week we'll still be here, but if you show up at the school 10:30 in 2 weeks, you will not be here with anybody but yourself. So just know that coming up. All right, let me jump into this. There's this question I have for you, and that's, how do you have a Christianity that thrives when we live in a world where Christianity doesn't seem like it's thriving in America? How do you be an American Christian and thrive when we live in America and Christianity isn't? I've seen different stats, and some of them I believe, some of them I don't, but I do know that one thing that's true is that in the last, really, if you look at the turn of the century, 19th century even, you can see that there was this movement where churches in Europe, churches in America would send missionaries by the groves. I mean, the numbers were in the 4,400,000 people a year into Asia, into Africa, different places. And so we were sending out people to share the gospel. In the last, really the last 100 years, there's been this reverse, this shift. Now, in places in Africa and in Asia, they're actually sending missionaries over to Europe. Because we have this thing where there's this post-Christian America that's kind of happening. We've seen some things, too, where it seems like for the millennials, there's this generation where now 48% of them have no church background. There's this idea that Christianity in the West is kind of getting older and it's getting smaller. Now, here's the thing. Just because what you and I experience as Christians and in churches in America might be changing doesn't mean the kingdom is falling apart. Because here's what's interesting, is actually if you look at the numbers of people that are following Jesus, when you look at the whole world, there's more Christians now than there's ever been. It's just that huge growth of people following Jesus isn't in America. It's in Africa, it's in Asia, but it's not necessarily in Spring Hill. And so, I don't know if you've felt this before, and I'm just kind of being honest. I feel like sometimes I wonder how I'm supposed to thrive as a Christian when it seems like Christianity is not thriving here. And so what do you have to pass on? How do you fight the good fight? That's what I want to talk about. There's a text that I wanted to read. We've been looking at a relationship between Paul and Timothy and how Paul has these words of wisdom to pour into Timothy's life about the world that he's in. And so I want to get some strength from him because Timothy had his struggles and his things to overcome. Go Church, in a lot of ways, is like a Timothy. We have a lot of things to figure out, a lot of things to grow and develop and learn. I think we've got a lot of great examples from different people, but I'm curious to see what the church of the future will look like. Because here's the deal, for a lot of us, that's what we're going to be a part of. And so what does it look like to be a church in a post-Christian Spring Hill? In a post-Christian America. And so I want to look at some text to give us some clarity on maybe what that might look like and what we do because of it. And so again, this is Paul having a conversation with Timothy. We've been looking at that all this month. And so this is, if you go ahead and put this on the screen, this is 1 Timothy chapter 6. Let's just start with verse 12. Paul says to Timothy, "Fight the good fight of your faith. Take hold of eternal life in which you were called when you made your good confession in the presence of many witnesses." Let's just leave it there for a second. Take hold of the eternal life to which you were called. This is something that you grasp, that you hold on to. Again, I want to thrive as a Christian. And again, whether you agree if it's a Christianity that's thriving in America or not, the point is I want you, I want me to thrive as a Christian, to take hold of the eternal life that we've been given. And so I do feel like literally maybe for me this morning, just to kind of fight through speaking because I don't feel good, I'm ready to go lay down, but there's much bigger fights that we're all a part of. And I think that big one is, what do we do as Christians in a world that's changing? It seems like it doesn't need our help or want our involvement as much as it used to. We're in the middle of some kind of struggle, some kind of fight, and so I want to be very aware of that. I want to figure out how best we can contribute to the kingdom and thrive as Christians, because I think there is so much more for us to do. So go ahead and jump to those next ones for me. Verse 17. Command those who are rich in the present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides with everything for our enjoyment. Verse 18. Keep going, one more. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. And this way they will lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of life that is truly life. So that they may take hold of life that is truly life, to be rich in good deeds. Acts 16 talks about it's better to give than it is to receive, that there is more to you than you think there is. There's this fight that we're a part of, and what you give back means a whole lot. And I think it's connected to what it really means to thrive in life. And so what I want to talk to you guys about for a little bit is what kind of future it might look like for us in the church. What opportunities we have to pass on what we've been given. What things we can do to fight the good fight of faith. Because there will be opposition. There will be struggle. And some of you know that all too well, right? We have days kind of like I am today where you can get tired, but here's what unfortunately I know is true. The enemy has days as well, and he doesn't get tired. Our kids have a relentless pursuit of a powerful future, and we get to shape that, but someone else has another idea in mind for their future. And so we live in a world where it will be a fight. If you're a Christian and you were told that when you decided to do that, things would only get easier and better for you, I'm sorry, but I think you were lied to. It will be a struggle. And it will be a good one at that. It will be a good fight. And so what does that look like for us? I'm excited. I think there are some good things that will happen in the future for what the church looks like. Just because Christianity might not be thriving in America doesn't mean that God's church isn't. And we get a chance to do something very meaningful in the middle of that. I've read a lot of really cool articles, and I want to touch on some points I got from an author. His name is Kerry Newhoff. I look up to him with some cool ideas, and so he paints a picture of a couple things and some ideas I've thought about. I want to kind of paint a picture of what I think we're going to kind of see as the future is unfolded in front of us. The things that Go Church literally will probably be a part of. And so some things I think that we can be aware of in this fight to show the world a gospel that changes everything. And so there's a couple things I want to talk about. The first one being, and I've talked to you about this before, I'm pretty sure. We have a mission, and that's to go make disciples of all nations, and that's been very clear since the beginning, and that is not changing, but the model will. The method that we do it will change. I heard a story that there was a couple pretty powerful companies that had profited a lot from the horse and buggy carriage industry, and then they saw this thing called an automobile, and they thought, no way. It cost too much money, it made too much pollution. There's no way, we're not going to invest in anything to do with that. We feel like that's just going to be a trend, and it's going to go away, and people are going to still ride around with horses in front of the buggy. And how did that work out for them? It seems like things are a little bit different than they thought, and so sometimes you have a strategy, and you have a mission in mind, but if you don't realize what's changing, then things can be different for you. I think about the companies like Apple and Kodak. I think how Apple had this idea to address people where they were at, and they kind of showed some new technology that changed with the times, and we're a product of that with the iPhone and different things that have changed the world. And Kodak thought that no one would ever replace the different ways of taking pictures and what's happened to them, and making a long story short, they had a mission in mind, but they didn't change their strategy, and now they don't exist the way they used to. I think the church is in a very similar position where the mission of Jesus does not change. But the way we go about doing it, I think will have to shift. And this is just me, I could be wrong, but I get the impression that what we have come to know, maybe for the last 100 years, where churches just kind of get bigger and they have bigger buildings, and you can come in there with all the government support and all the kind of help that you might need, I don't know that that will always exist. I think we're going to live in a different world where things are going to look different for the churches of the future. Because here's the second thing. Here's what I know. Just because the mission's going to stay the same and the model might change, the second thing, this is very important. The text seems to make very clear that the gathering of believers will never go away. And so, yes, it might not be a big building, it might not be in a school, but it'll always be in a living room. It'll always be a group of people gathered together because God always has his remnant of believers that will come in contact with one another. No matter what happens politically, no matter what happens in your future and what happens to Christianity in America, you will always have opportunity to meet with other believers for the glory of God. You will always have that environment. That gathering will never go away. History has shown us that. I believe that the scriptures are pointing to that you will always have that opportunity. But it might not look what you're used to. And that's the future that could be for us. And so with that being said, many churches, including us, we care about small groups. We care about people being in groups and gathering together because that will never go away. You will always have that opportunity to worship God with other people. Again, the setting might be a little bit different, but you're going to have that opportunity. And so we want to make sure that that's a big deal because you need to have other people. You cannot do life by yourself. You need to have that opportunity to worship with other people. Another thing that I notice, and I think I'm already seeing this happen, and I'm very excited about it, is that a lot of you have seen what it means to be a part of churches where there's kind of the consumer Christian mentality, or churches will put together a lot so that it's attractive to other people when they come in, and so we kind of want to make it a beneficial thing for other people, and so we're seeker sensitive, and whatever we can do to make you happy. I see there's a shift coming where because it seems like it will be less and less of an attraction to be a Christian in our country, to where you will have to make some clear distinctions about what you believe versus what other people believe. Where when you'll come to churches and realize that you have to actually give versus just kind of take what you want, there's going to be this refinement by fire. Where there will be people that choose to follow Jesus because they actually want to follow Jesus. And they're going to give everything they can to him. And they're going to be sold out for whatever that mission might be. And then there's going to be those that kind of came because they thought Christianity would make them feel better, or because their friends told them that it would be nice and it just kind of was convenient for their lifestyle. But there will be a day where it is less convenient than it has been. And so there'll be this separation where there's this refinement of those that really care about the mission, and the church will change in a very, very powerful way. And here's one of the ways I see that is because I think, and I already see this with different generations that have come up after me and those before me, but I think people will start caring a lot more about what a church does versus what a church says. And so actions speaking up what they believe and doing something to have an impact in a positive way in the world around them, versus just talking about what it might look like if we did these things. And so people will care more about the actions and the movement of the kingdom of God and what the people of God do versus the conversations of the crowds. And so I can see this shift coming where people, when they come to worship Jesus, they really have to do it. You know how I know that's true? I can look at centuries and centuries of history have shown me, even in the middle of persecution, even in the middle of difficult environments to worship God, there was always people, even when they were not legally allowed to, they would find a gathering where they could come together and they could worship God. And even when it wasn't convenient, even when it was illegal, they would still do that because they knew what mattered the most. I think that might happen for some of us. I think there will be persecution at some levels for some of you. I think there will be things that make it less convenient for you to be a Christian. But, like most all of you know, you're not doing it for the convenience. You're not doing this so that you can be part of a fan club. You're doing this for something much, much deeper than that. And if you ask me, that only makes a stronger church, not a weaker one. And here's what I see too as a bit of a trend of what's coming is I think people will start looking at church a little differently, especially the leadership. And you've heard us do this a little bit already, and I think there's more to this idea, and that is the church will start measuring engagement versus attendance. And so how well are people engaged in what the church is doing, what the mission of the church really is? Because I've been a part of it, you've maybe seen this before too, where there can be a lot of people in a room, but they're not really sold out to the idea. There can be a lot of fans at a stadium, but really the followers of Jesus can be a different crowd altogether. And so churches are going to start shifting to this idea of being engaging to people and engaging people in the mission versus just having them attend. And here's how I know that's true. Because churches have realized that if we measure success as a church by how many people show up once a week on a Sunday does not equal what really healthy church looks like. We got to ask questions like what happens Monday through Saturday, and how are we engaging in the gospel in ways that really mean something for people in a deeper way. And so we're trying to figure some of that stuff out. And that kind of leads me to this next very, very big idea that I honestly want your prayer for. There's this thing happening where, because most of the time we're all always on our phone or some kind of digital device, the church is asking, how do we get there? How do we do this too? Now, I don't know that it's a supplement that you don't have to show up and be part of the gathering and you can just kind of watch church on your phone and you'll be okay, because I think that's not true. But I do think there's something to be said about it. I wonder what the potential of the kingdom could be the more we can bring the gospel to people where they're already on their phone all the time. And so I see this engagement shift where there are a lot of people that might not attend a Sunday morning. In fact, we're in the middle of that right now. Where a lot of you know this, we're in the middle of summertime and people are on vacations and people are this. And so attendance is literally low, and it can be low, but people are engaged in other ways. And so they'll listen to sermons every day through a podcast, or they're going to hear from this. So people are engaged in their faith. It just doesn't always look like an attendance once a week at a church somewhere. And so how do we tap into that more? Because again, the mission, making disciples of all nations, that's not going anywhere. But the method, the way that churches do that, I think is going to change a little bit. And so I wanted you to know that I talked to Mikey about this week. I've been praying about it a whole lot. I think there are some ways for us, for me to be, whether that's making more videos or doing something digitally to help people in a different way. I don't know what that's going to look like. I just know I want to continue to dig into, God, what do you want to use this medium for? How can we better engage people? And so I've been praying a lot about that because I see this change. I see this shift. I notice that a lot of people, they have a great relationship with God, or so they would tell you, but they don't see any need to show up on a Sunday morning. And that's a concern of mine. And so how do we address this thing where people will engage on social media, on YouTube, on whatever it might be that they're on for many hours a week, but not always on a Sunday morning in a building somewhere? And so there's this shift that I see happening. And all of these things are different ideas about what our culture is becoming and how the church will exist in that space. And I say all these different ideas to say it is a fight of the faith worth fighting for. Because I do believe there's a way to thrive as a Christian in a Christianity that isn't thriving. I believe there's a way to do things that Jesus has in mind for us that might look differently than what you've been shown or what you've seen before. Just because we don't know what tomorrow holds, we still know who holds tomorrow. We know what's going to happen next. My father-in-law, I'll never forget it. He said to me many times before, Jake, the world isn't falling apart. The world is falling into place. All these things, these changes, these things that happen in our lives on a personal level and a church level, they will not always make sense and they can be very difficult. But do not forget that He has got it all figured out. He holds the whole world in His hands, and He's given us a clear plan. I want to challenge you with, I know it's a lot of different little points, but 3 ideas for you on a personal level, for the fight of your faith, for the way that you impact other people around you, for the way that you pass on your faith to others. Here's what I've seen is true in my life. I want to encourage you with this. This is stuff from Timothy Keller, one of my favorite authors too, and different people have shaped these ideas into my life. If there's any way that I and that you can pass on your faith to other people, whether they be younger than you or older than you, whether they be people that know the gospel or don't, whether they be people that are way more educated and maybe intimidating than you, that there's some great things that you can do no matter what that relationship is in front of you to pass on your faith. And here's the three simple ideas. You are so attractive when you love God passionately and honestly. I think I might have told you this story before, but one of my favorite books, Blue Like Jazz. I actually shouldn't say my favorite books. I just like the intro because of this illustration I'm going to make. I kind of forget the rest of the book. But this author, he makes this really cool illustration where he talks about this friend of his, and they went to a jazz club together. And he just went with his friend to go drink and have a good time. And he didn't really like jazz, and so wasn't sure why they went to this jazz club. And they get there. And this musician, it's kind of an open mic thing, but it's just kind of the one guy that's holding down the whole place and doing his thing. And so they're just kind of enjoying their drinks together. And Donald Miller, the author, kind of can't get over this guy that's playing way too loud and doesn't like jazz. But he notices this musician never looks up. He's always got his eyes closed, and he is so into his music that he doesn't realize when people are coming and when they're going. And he is just in love with jazz. And so Donald Miller is having this drink with his friend, and time goes by and he's getting ready to leave, and he realizes that he kind of liked jazz more when he left than when he got in there, because when he saw this guy so passionately sing his songs and play jazz, it got Donald's attention, and he cared about jazz in a different way, because when people are doing something that they're so passionate about, you can't help but notice that. In fact, that's part of the way I became a Christian. When I was 17, I had friends that were Christians, and I thought they were crazy because of what I had heard before. But I saw a passion in them that specifically for me, they were happy when I didn't think someone could be. When they didn't have stuff, because I thought stuff made you happy when I was 17. And then they didn't have stuff, but they were still really, really happy. And they seemed to be passionate about this person named Jesus, and that drew me into that. And so for whoever's in your life that you can pass on your faith to, the best thing you can do is passionately love Jesus. If you do that, other people will notice, specifically your kids, specifically your coworkers. If you genuinely love Jesus, they're going to see it. And the opposite is true as well. Man, good luck telling people about the love of Jesus if it doesn't look like you care at all. How you worship God matters. How you are passionate about your Creator has a huge impact on other people. A second thing I've noticed, so true for me, and those of you that know me well know I struggle with this, but to be very clear with practical application about your faith. I can put myself in trouble because I speak, and that's part of what God's gifted me to do. But when we present ideas and I say, hey, I'm passing on my faith because I gave someone the intellectual idea that it's better to love your enemies than it is to fight them or to pray for those who persecute you. And I pass on some intellectual concept. That's not really it at all, because there's a generation that says, I don't need the ideas, I just need this practically lived out in front of me. And so how am I showing other people my faith? And when I say that you should be loving, how am I actually loving people because they want to see it? When they say I am generous and I care about giving, then how am I actually living that out so that they can see that that's what matters the most? When people are investigating Christianity and you just talk to them about some great ideas, that has some value, but it is nothing compared to when you actually practically live out your faith, because you can't hide it anymore. Because it can't be some kind of hypocritical joke. If you actually love Jesus and they can see it in the way that you live your life and they can see it in the way you spend your time, then that will have a huge impact on the people that you pass on your faith to. And last but not least, you've got to be honest about it. You've got to be authentic. I think one of my favorite things in my time in leadership so far is I was warned, I was kind of put some brakes on the idea of, Jake, don't be too vulnerable. Don't be too honest, because that can get you in trouble. And I've heard that before, and I agree with where that idea is coming from. But I can tell you story after story of times in my life where I would meet someone, whether that be at a park when we're doing some outreach thing or whatever, and if I just am honest about my struggles too, and how I know Jesus or the ways that I still don't, and that I do not have it all together, man, that has a huge impact on other people. When I stopped pretending like I had all the answers, things got so much better for me. Because honestly, I don't think the people that don't know Jesus are wanting me to pretend like I have all the answers. Because they're going to see right through the pretending anyway. And in fact, they've got enough people in their life that are faking it. So just be honest about where you're at. And that's the best thing, because you know what that does? That makes you harder and harder to find and him easier and easier to see. So just get out of the way and worry less about being perfect in front of other people. Just be honest about what you struggle with. And I love, as a Christian, saying, yeah, I struggle with this too. Yeah, I deal with this also, because that is so loud, because then other people realize you're just like them. But what's different about you is that you have someone that fixes the problem, that changes the story. And that has such a powerful impact on other people when you would pass on that kind of faith. And so I don't always know what the world is going to look like moving forward for us. I don't know what Go Church will look like in the next 20 years, but I have a feeling that it will be very different. Because I think God has got different things that He's doing, and the mission will never go away, but the way we do it might change some. And I want to leave you with this very powerful truth that I kind of saw in Scripture I want to show you guys. As I think through the Old Testament, I can think of many, many stories where the nation of Israel was connected to God, and they were doing great things, and they were God's people and doing powerful things in His name. And then there'd be the next chapter of the story, and all of a sudden they kind of fell away, and then they were worshiping idols, and things weren't going very well. And the guy had to get their attention again and kind of move on and build a new leader, and brought in a prophet, brought in a king, and did all these different things over thousands of years, and kind of resurrected the church and resurrected the people of God in Israel. And this happened over and over and over again. Specifically, you guys probably know some of the story. I think about Moses and how God called him to set my people free. They had been slaves for so long, and so it's time for them to be free. And Moses was given quite a plethora of ability in the sense that God was going to go with him and for him. And anytime Moses would speak, God was in that moment, and the people are freed. And you guys know some of the story, and they were led by a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day, and they were brought to this promised land. And not very long after, as things kind of calmed down and the people of God knew that they had been set free by him, and Moses was their leader, and they had the 10 Commandments, and God had given them a new life and given them this miraculous sign that he is with his people. And if you know the story, much not long after this, they went right back to worshiping idols again and doing different things, and they kind of lost their way. Somehow time just kind of changed their heart, and things were different for them. And so they lost the faith. And again, God had to get their attention and do something else to bring it back up. And you see this all throughout the history of the church, all throughout the nation of Israel. But in contrary, maybe the most effective thing that would help the faith of the church, the people of God, continue was when fathers would pass on their faith to their sons and their daughters, when families would share what they've been taught, when generations would care about passing on what they've been taught from a generation before. And so here's the idea I want to leave you with. When you pass on your faith to other people, it is more powerful than the miracles of the nations. And so when God does these great displays and different things that really gets thousands and millions of people's attention, it is not as powerful. It is not as meaningful as when you care about your family and the people close in your life, the few, and invest in them. Then something really meaningful happens. You know how I know this is true? Because Jesus knew the best way for this to work is when he said, you know what? I want you to go make disciples of all nations. I want you to baptize people in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Teach them everything I've taught you, and I will be with you always. This ministry, this mission, he knew that would work. He knew that no matter what would happen in the church here or overseas or over there, no matter what takes place in the world that we're going to be a part of, he said, if you would do this thing and pass on what you've been given, it will always work. And I can't promise you that the church for the next 100 years is going to look the same way it did before. I have a feeling it would get more difficult. But if you remember who gave you the mission and what you've been called to do, and then in fact you'll have more purpose and more meaning in life when you pass on what he's given you to the few that he's entrusted you with, then you'll be a part of something incredible. And I think in that moment, even in a Christianity that seems like it's not thriving, you will be a Christian that does. And so there are many, many things that makes us stressed out and overwhelmed. And in fact, we're going to close with a song here in just a second talking about whatever it is for you that makes you stressed out. Maybe it was just me that worries about the church in the next 20 years and not you, and that's probably okay too. But I know for me, no matter what the research might say, no matter what tomorrow might look like, I know who holds that. I know who I'm supposed to spend more time with. And so I challenge you that whenever you're unsure about your tomorrow and not sure what God wants you to do with your life, that you remember that he has given you a clear mission that will never go away. He has given you impact that goes beyond what you can comprehend. He has given you a legacy that will be louder than the miracles of the nations when you pass on the faith that you've been given, when you fight the good fight of your faith and thrive in the ministry that God's called you to do and pass on all the good that God's put in here to those who don't know it. Man, that is something worth celebrating. That's something worth praising Jesus for. And so what I want to do is I want to close in prayer and have the worship team come back up, and I want you to think about what it means for you to let him take whatever your struggle is, whatever your fight is right now. Let him have that. Let him take that and teach you some things that he wants to tell you, because no matter what your problem might be, he'll have answers to those things. And I know for me, whatever those problems might be, specifically with the way the church in America looks, he's trustworthy, and I trust him with it. And so for those of you that are unsure about what the future of the church looks like, just know that we're going to follow him wherever, and he says, nothing will prevail against my church. The gates of hell will never prevail against my kingdom. It might look a little different than you thought. Don't hold on too much to the traditions of your past, but the future will be his, and he's taking care of all of it. The world is not falling apart. It is falling into place. And trust the King who said it so and made a way for you to be victorious, even in a world full of defeat. Cast your cares on him I'm excited for this new song and this opportunity to sing. Mikey's going to tell a little bit more about it because I forgot all the words in the song, but I listened to it with him this week, and sometimes it's just good to take a moment and remember what he does. And so for me, man, listen to the words of this song. The melody's really cool too, but dang, sometimes the words are what you need to hear. So I pray that you would enjoy God speaking to you today. I thank you guys for the opportunity to do ministry together, and know that if you continue to invest in other people and pass on what you've been given, it will be louder than the biggest miracle all the nations have ever seen. God has great purpose for you. Take what you've been taught and pass it on to others. It will not be a waste of your time. Let me pray, and let's give him praise. Father God, I love you. I thank you for this place. I thank you for the interns. I know that I wasn't sure they were going to be here this week until I kind of find out, like on